Good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to Words on Whiskey, episode 33, brought to you by Irish Whiskey Magazine. And we have an exciting show this week. A real privilege to have two wonderful gentlemen here that have told a wonderful story and have lots of wonderful stories to share with us. And I'll introduce them now. So we're bringing in Greg Swartz and Jim McEwan. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, sir.
How are you? Hello, everybody. So we're Greg from the States, and Jim, you're in Islay at the moment. So
that's right.
Hopefully we won't have any lag between the time zones, but we should be okay. So firstly, you're both very welcome. Thank you for doing us the honor and giving us the privilege of being guests on our show. I know there's a huge fan base over here in Ireland for Scotch and for what you've done in Bruichladdich particularly. And Greg, of course, you've brought this to life in a fantastic movie. So perhaps you might want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, Greg, first, a little bit about your background and how an American ended up in Islay making a movie about Scotch. And
I got tricked. I was tricked. No, I was an exchange student in Scotland when I was in college, and I was actually lived in Ireland for a while as well. But the film really came together when my wife and I went to Scotland for our 10th anniversary. My wife is Irish, but had never been to Scotland before. So we went on a tour, and the idea started kind of taking root then. I'd been drinking whiskey for years, but I'd only ever been on the receiving end. This is when I wanted to start exploring the crafting end of it. And I was very, very fortunate that we made a wish list of who we wanted and got every single one of them, to be honest with you. But the top of the wish list was Jim.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an incredible list of people that you managed to get. Was there any intrepidation, any sense of suspicion of this American coming over and wanting to make a film about Islay, or you were treated with open arms?
Not from my side, no. I mean, we got immediate yeses from everybody, and everyone was so gracious and welcoming on Islay and on mainland Scotland as well.
Yeah, and you were saying your father-in-law is a little bit at odds with you for not having made an Irish whiskey movie first.
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, you've got some fantastic names there. You've got Lachlan McIntyre, Chris Leggett, Mark Reynier. You had Charles McLean on obviously you have Jim as well, Neil Ridley, Rachel, Becky Paskin. All the big names are in this movie. Was it a difficult task to actually convince them to come on it?
No. I mean, the truth is, once Jim was on board, we had a credibility, and I think it made it easier to get everyone else. And I'm not just saying that because Jim's here, but I mean, honestly, the only distiller we wanted to talk to who we didn't get to was Dr. Bill Lumsden, and he was out of the country while we were shooting the film. That was the only person we didn't get to include.
Yeah, but it's not a branded movie, and if anybody hasn't seen the movie is called The Water of Life, the Whisky Film, or Our Whisky Film, and I've seen quite a few whiskey movies, and I have to say this one stands out as being one that really gets to the essence of what whiskey can mean for individuals and for a nation and for small communities. And I think you really got to the hub of that. And I think beautifully shot without being over cinematic and over dramatic. But I think it's a real credit to you. So, I mean, how long did it take to start putting it together and actually see it through to fruition?
Oh, well, 2.5 years. I mean, we shot most of the film about 2 years ago, but we started for about 6 months putting it together before that. And then, I mean, the film, to be honest with you, though, the film has been done for the last 7 months. We were waiting for the world to start turning again. And when that became apparent that wasn't going to happen right away, we decided to take matters into our own hands.
Yeah. So obviously COVID has had a huge impact on the release of it. I know you did this release, the Burns Week release, where you showed the movie for a week.
Yeah.
I think that was ending tonight, or it's ended now?
It ends tonight. Tonight's our final night.
Tonight is the last night at 9 o'clock, if anybody's interested. And we have a lot of guests on actually from all over the world, with people from Tasmania, Italy, Ireland, States, all over. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to put, please do enter them in here. We'd be delighted to put them to either Jim or Greg. So I suppose we'll introduce, or doesn't need introduction, but Jim, good evening. Hi, welcome.
Good evening, sir. Nice to see you guys, both Greg and Sergio. This is a real pleasure for me.
Well,
I take it the check is in the post.
okay. Yeah, slow post. I think COVID got to it. You should have received it by now. But well, tell me, actually, being on Islay now, and of course the second festival being cancelled, what's the impact for the locals there with COVID? How are people coping?
We are blessed because we are on an island, and they're very strict on the ferries, and then there's only 2 flights a day in from Glasgow, so everybody's paying attention, you know. So I'm taking it very, very seriously, because as you can imagine, if it came onto an island, we're really in trouble. Yeah. So everybody's taking every precaution and wearing masks and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so far I'm touching wood. You know, so far we've had no cases, but as I say, I'm touching wood.
Yeah, but the economic impact of not having the tourists this year, obviously that's a huge.
Yeah, that's just one of these things. Probably a lot of the people couldn't afford to come anyway. If they weren't working, they wouldn't have the money to come in the first place, you know. Yeah, and, you know, whiskey will still be sold as time goes on. In fact, the sales of whiskey are quite high because people are in a state of nervousness and anxiety. So the only thing that works there is a decent dram. You know, you sit down and have a good dram. I don't mean to get drunk, but a nice glass of Lafroig or a nice glass of Ardbeg or whatever, you know. The single malt people will not stop drinking, that's for sure.
Well, I'm going to pick my drink here, and I have the Bruichladdich Organic, which
it's called Orgasmic. Sorry, you've named it
Orgasmic, wrong. Yeah. I got the one with the typo on it. I don't know what, Greg, what are you drinking? Like, say you
I'm drinking a
Port Charlotte. Yeah, very nice. And Jim, you're being well behaved, are you?
Yes, I'm driving, so I'm drinking water. I'll have a couple of drams later, you know.
Okay, well, sláinte about.
We're on an island, you know. It's the same rules apply. You don't drink and drive. Because you're on an island with 3 policemen, you still adhere to the law, you know what I mean?
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, look, I think the best way to start off would probably to show a clip from a trailer from the movie, and we'll roll that there now and give people an indication of what they've either seen or are missing. So let's see. Now, I've no sound on that. Don't know if you can hear anything.
No.
Let's try that again. We had it earlier. It's not a silent movie, is it, Craig?
It's not.
Yeah.
My mum used to say, "Did you go to school today?" I said, "Yep." She said, "Come here." And she smelled it. I know. You've been in that damn distillery again. Bed, no dinner.
Ancient, natural, old, pure.
The blood of one small nation. Absolutely. In the mid-1970s, Scotch whisky ceased to be fashionable when it became Dad's drink.
There was just a massive bust.
I've never once met anyone who goes, and there's no emotion behind it. If you do that, God, go and drink vodka.
Even though I'm a scientist, it's actually much, much more of an art.
Looking at Bruichladdich, I said, someday I would love to make whiskey at distillery.
The place was falling apart. There was a sign. It sort of encompasses the whole whiskey industry at the time. Exclamation. And I can remember thinking, I've got to do something about it.
I got a phone call from the chairman of Bruichladdich. I said, the answer is yes. He said, really?
Very different people with different background and experience who all came together with the same goal of bringing this distillery back to life.
The most unlikely partnership in the history of whiskey.
It's hysterical. Jim reveled in the freedom that he was given, sometimes a little too much.
I could make virtually what I wanted.
There's a Bruichladdich every week, wasn't it? There's probably too many.
I said, why are you doing this? He looked at me with these wild eyes and said, because we can, and because we're having fun.
There aren't as many true mavericks anymore, learning quite literally from scratch.
Mike and I had many battles.
We detonated.
Yeah, emotionally, it cost me a lot.
But we did it. We touched the void. Oh my God. How far can we go, you know?
There you go. Slightly in slow motion, but you get the gist of it. I mean, it's a phenomenal movie. If you can watch that movie and not feel something, then I don't know. I mean, it really pulls at certain points. It really pulls at the heartstrings, and other times it just makes you feel so joyous. It's unbelievable. But so, from that point of view, the movie's been a fantastic piece of work. So again, Greg, I know it's part of the team that you work with. Could you tell us a little bit about Blacksmith and Jones, the movie producing company?
Well, Blacksmith and Jones is myself and my business partner, Trevor Jones, our producer, and it's a two-person company at this point. And we've been making films together for 12 years now. And this is our first feature documentary. This is the biggest thing we've undertaken, at least just us together. I mean, we've done co-productions with other companies that we were part of a much bigger thing, but this was the biggest thing we've done on our own. And we both kind of came at this from we both love whiskey, and it just kind of grew from there. And.
Yeah. I don't think you could make this movie. It certainly wouldn't be the quality if you weren't real whiskey lovers, and I think that definitely comes through. Definitely. So there were a lot of people involved. There was Trevor Jones, Brittany Curran was what produced, Richard Palema, Robert Taylor, and Rob Chatelain were editors. I'm sure I've left some people out, but it wasn't a massive team.
No, I mean, documentaries tend to have small crews anyway. And, I will tell you, one of the things that we said from the get-go was that we wanted the film to be more like the Chef's Table series than a traveling type film. We didn't want to do a travelogue. There's been loads of those, and they're great. But that's just not, we wanted to focus on people. We wanted to tell people stories and focus on craftsmanship. And, we were actually lucky. One of our editors, Robert Taylor, actually works for the Chef's Table. And we actually got a lot of early post advice from them as well. Yeah. And then our other editor, Rob Chatelain, is an absolute 10th degree black belt in whiskey. Who he has an entire cupboard in his house full of black art.
All right, okay, nice. Yeah, that's a big collection.
Yeah, his whiskey collection is ridiculous.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I mean, mine's ridiculous, but his is ridiculouser.
More ridiculous. Yeah, excellent. Well, Jim, just going maybe touching on your childhood growing up in Islay. We know you were a bit of a truant in school.
Yeah, that was. I had to go past the distillery. I was born in Main Street, Bowmore. You've never been there, but Greg's been there. Where the Royal Bank of Scotland is now. I can assure you, when I was born there was not a bank. There was 4 families sharing one house in 4 different sections. And to get to school, I had to go past the distillery every day. And I used to look in the window to the malt barns, and it was the aroma that got me fixed. There's the smell of the green malt getting turned. There's the smell of human sweat, the smell of whiskey from the men's breath, and the smell of pipe tobacco. It was like an olfactory orgasm for a boy of my age, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I wanted to be a whiskey drinking, pipe smoking, malt turning guy. So I used to go in sometimes and sweep the floors in the malt barns and not go to school. But as I say, when I went home, my mother could smell the alcohol, the smoke, and the whole lot. So I got a hot backside and sent to bed pretty quickly. But yeah, it was good. When you live in a whisky island, everybody you know is working or assisting in the distilleries, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Could you have ever seen yourself do anything else, Jim? Did it ever cross your mind to leave the island to do anything else?
Yeah, when I left school, I wanted to join the military. So I wanted to join the Royal Corps of Signals. And so I went away to Glasgow and I went to the recruiting office and I signed up. It was going to be a 12-year in the army. I was only 16 at the time, boy soldier. And I came back home and I said to my grandmother, Kate, I said, that's me, I'm going to sign up for 12 years. And she totally broke down and cried her eyes out. And she's holding me as tight as she can. And she says, if you go, I'll not be here when you come back. Don't go.
Ooh.
So that's a tough one to get out of, isn't it? She says, I won't be here. It'll break my heart. This is my grandmother, Kate. Don't go. So I turned down the invitation to join the Royal Corps of Signals and I started to work at Bowmore Distillery. So I was lucky that my grandmother held me at her arms and said, no.
Yeah. We talked about this briefly before. I mean, the amount of coincidences and the path that your career has taken have been phenomenal. But at each point, you've really been ready to capture every opportunity that's come your way. And, you know, these things don't happen just purely by luck. So you were fortunate in the one sense that you had David Bell, I mean, the longest serving cooper
in the world
at Bowmore to start you off. And he very much took you under his wing.
Absolutely. He was a real Christian. He had a great sense of humour. He followed a football team called Partick Thistle, which shows you how brave he was because they were absolute rubbish.
That's the same team that Dave Broom supports, I think.
Is it? Yeah. He's a Maryhill man. They come from Maryhill in Glasgow. So yeah, Davey was really, really good. He just didn't teach me coopering. He taught me a lot more about being a decent guy and being honest and all that sort of stuff. And he was always there. He was a tough wee guy, you know. He came from Aberfoyle and he served in the First World War in a regiment called the Highland Light Infantry. So he saw death full on a huge scale. So, and he survived. So it was just a privilege and an honour to work for and with such a talented man. He was the #1 cooper in the world. What happens when you become a cooper? You get a number. And as people retire from the craft, you move up or move down. The number goes down. And he was #1 in the world for many, many years, the #1 cooper. What a privilege that was to work for such a man who had seen poverty, he had seen death in mass numbers, and he came to the island of Islay from Aberfoyle. He was working in the cooperage in Glasgow, and he became very much a staunch supporter in the community. He was a good Christian, went to school, went to church every Sunday. So I could not have had a better teacher because I was a bit of a tearaway, you know, so he kind of calmed me down a little bit.
Did you need that? Did you need that, Jim? Did you need a moral compass or somebody to...
I think so, yeah, I think so. You know, and he was one of these guys who, he was a very sympathetic guy, you understand. He had a soft heart, you know, he became quite tough on you. I remember when I started in the cooperage, I came from a very poor family, you must understand. I was brought up by my mum and my gran, and I remember when I went to work in the cooperage in my first week, I didn't have a pair of working boots. All I had was a pair of what you call baseball boots. Now, you can't roll barrels with baseball boots because they'll crush your feet, you understand, of the barrel. Yeah. So when I got my first salary, which was 5 guineas, £5 and 5 shillings, he took me down to the local shoe shop and spoke to the man who owned it, a lovely guy called Robert Hodgson, and he said, get Jim a pair of boots and he'll come every week and he'll give you 5 shillings until they're paid. And they cost 21 shillings. So it was, he was looking after me, not just as a cooper, but as like a son.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like a son.
Yeah, that very much comes across in the movie. So, I mean, you started as a cooper. How did you develop then? There's a very poignant part in the movie. I don't want to give everything that happens in the movie away. So, Greg, if I overstep the mark, forgive me. But there's a point in the movie where you're 22 and he gives you the keys to the distillery.
Oh, man, that was, at that age, that was unbelievable. First of all, you've got to prove yourself that you're not a drinker because you're working amongst barrels of whiskey every day. Yeah. So I was never, ever a drinker. I enjoy a dram, like the rest of the world enjoys a dram, but I was never a drinker. I never missed a day's work because of alcohol. And as I say, the day you're talking about, I served my time. I was 21. I was a fully fledged cooper. I could build barrels. I could look after casks in the warehouse and all that sort of stuff. We were responsible for all the full casks in the warehousing. And so he never warned me he was leaving. And it was a Friday, and he came up to me. Everybody else was out the cooperage. We had our aprons on, our cooper's aprons. And he took my hand like that. And in his hand was the keys to all the warehouses in Ardnahoe Distillery. And he said, Jim, this is yours. It's your time now. And don't let me down. And I'm like 21. And I'm thinking, oh my God. I've got all these barrels to look after in there and all that sort of stuff. He says, I'm off. He was about 73, 74 at that age. So you had to grow up quickly at that time because you were responsible for all the barrels and the maintenance of them and the filling of the barrels and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, you must have done. You spent 38 years in Bowmore, so I presume you did enjoy it. But
well, I spent a lot of time in Glasgow. I trained as a blender.
Right, okay. Yeah.
So I was using my nose for the first time, and so I learned how to become a blender. And all whiskies are not equal in the eyes of a blender. You get first classes, second classes, third classes, and so on. So if you're making up a blend, which is malt and grain whiskey mixed, you don't want to use first class malts in a blend. You want to keep the first class malts to be sold as first class malt. So you have to know to differentiate what's first class and second class and so on. That was very interesting. So I trained for 3 years to become a blender and use my nose and my palate and all that. So that was in Glasgow.
Okay. But you were one of the, I suppose you were one of the first global brand ambassadors. You know, there was a point where you were spending 30 plus weeks a year on the road, going around all over the world, America, Hong Kong, Australia, all over.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that?
I did. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was like there was a willing audience out there to learn about. I would train sales teams. That was the primary purpose, you know. So anybody who was importing the whiskey from us, I would go out and train their salesmen. That was the first thing. And they would organise tastings for the best customers. So there was the training for the the whole company, our importers. And it was great fun because most of the people hadn't a clue about single malt whiskey, particularly Bowmore, which was smoky. I remember going into Tokyo and Osaka and Yokohama and Kobe and all these places. And I would have, it was really quite funny because the Japanese hadn't really developed a nose or a palate for peated whiskey. And there would be rows and rows of salesmen and all sorts of people. And I would watch them nosing it. And then they would taste it, and then they say, "Oh, yes, no." And this was it, you know. They didn't understand what they were drinking, so it was slowly but surely we won them over. There was myself. I think I was the only guy from Islay. There was Jim Cryle from Shivers Regal, Glenlivet. There's quite a few other Scotsmen out there, but yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah,
one of the
It wasn't really until the mid-'80s that malt whiskey came out. And again, Greg, you really portrayed that story about, you know, independent bottlers and single malts coming online. And you got to speak to a very, very famous David Campbell amongst them, you know, in terms of talking about single malts and where they came in the market. Because the market did go through a lull and then it picked up again. And that story is very well told, explaining how the independent bottlers took to the rise, and the small percentage of the market that was there. How much research did you actually have to do, Greg?
Well, it depends what you mean by research. Do you mean this kind of research? A lot.
That helps the other research.
No, I did it. I'm an avid reader. I always have been, and I just kind of immersed myself into it, for months. And I honestly, I lost track of how many books I read. But it wasn't just books. It was, frankly, YouTube. To be honest with you, I watched loads and loads of videos of Jim on YouTube, of other people on YouTube, kind of getting the sense of their stories and how they were going to fit in our story, researching independent bottling. I mean, and we were lucky enough that what happened was, the first time we met Jim, we sent a team over, myself and our one producer, Leslie Ann, and our cameraman, Brad, and that was it. And then we shot little bits of stuff and started building the film off of that. And one of the places we went then was we went to Gordon MacPhail for a day. And I really got a master class in wood that day, and then the history of Gordon MacPhail. But that really helped me kind of understand independent bottling, because it is a really unique phenomenon. Yeah. I can't think of any other industry in the world that has an equivalent of independent bottling in it. And and I've tried, and I've asked lots of people. When we did our interviews, we asked people. Yeah. And no one ever had a specific. There's no wine equivalent or beer equivalent of that. Yeah. And so I think that really kind of helped. That was the research kind of landed on me, as opposed to me looking for it in some cases.
Yeah.
It must have been a difficult job trying all these whiskies, Greg. It must have been murder for you.
It was pretty brutal. I'm sure the same for you, though.
Yeah.
Jim's been doing it slightly longer, perhaps, but actually, that's just a quick one there, Jim, about the mechanics of how you actually go and nose and taste these whiskies and do it in a way that doesn't leave you jaded. What as I say, 50 odd years in the business, and still have a passion and a hunger to be in the industry. There must be some techniques that
everybody's got their own style. If you're working actually in a blending situation, for example, when I was working in Glasgow, one of my jobs was the trucks were coming in from all over Scotland, from the Speyside, from the north, absolutely full of barrels, 70 barrels on. The barrels would be dropped off the track, the bunks would be pulled out, and you take a quick sample out of each cask and you go, first class, second class. You would get so good. It was like tuning a piano. Is it a first class, or a second class? Because when you're making a blended whiskey, you don't want to spend a lot of money, because they're going to mix it with grade whiskey. So first classes were set aside for single cask bottling. It's just practice, and you got to treat alcohol with respect, particularly whiskey. In that job, it's very, very easy to become alcoholic. Very, very easy, because it's with you 24/7. Well, not 24/7, but it's with you all the day. All these trucks coming in. So you build it up. You build up your own vocabulary and your own sensory ability, doing it every day. The secret is you just got to don't touch it. Just a little sip. I used to use my finger. I would just go like that, and I would just lick my lips. That was as much as I would do, one after the other. But generally, all whiskies are made superbly. There's not a bad distiller hardly in the world, but certainly not in Scotland. But the spirit is a child, and the child has to go to a good mother who has milk to survive. It's the same with whiskey. If you put good whiskey into a tired cask, it ain't going to mature. It's just going to sit there and do nothing. The oak has got nothing to give, so it'll sit there. So the quality of the cask is just so important. Unfortunately, as a cooper, I had a good idea about casks. I knew what a good cask was and wasn't. So while everybody thinks all whiskies are equal, from a blender's point of view, they're not. There's 3 divisions, first, second. Macallan is a first division. Glenlivet is a first division, and all that. So you categorise them for blending. So you build up your own mental library. So you see a cask, a distillery, you think, Christ, I hope it's in a good cask. So it's the play between the spirit and the oak. It's that getting together, So that's why cooperage is so important. Really, really important. I mean, I've seen great whiskies, maybe 30 years old, you take a sample, it's almost clear. I'd been in the wrong cask for 30 bloody years. What a waste, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the challenges that you had actually in Bruichladdich. So, I mean, what made you so sure of joining Bruichladdich? I mean, there's a moment in the film that you say you're looking out over Bruichladdich and you say, wouldn't that make a great distillery? But I mean, I think it was John McTaggart gave you a call, Sir John McTaggart from Bruichladdich gave you a call and said, do you want to... You didn't think about it very long.
No. I used to, when I was coopering up in Moore, I would get a phone call from the manager at Bruichladdich, Mr. Peter Logie, super guy, hard man, good businessman, good boss, and he was running Bruichladdich. And what would happen is, this is before the ferries came on. All the empty bars come in small coastal vessels called puffers. Have you ever heard the name puffers?
Yeah.
They were bringing in coal to the island, they were bringing in barley to the island, they were bringing in everything to the island. And a lot of casks used to get damaged on the journey over, or when the guys were taking them off the ship, they would just drop them in the ground and the staves would shift. So I'd go over and fix them. And I'd work on a Saturday and some evenings at Bruichladdich fixing their casks. And I fell in love with the guys that were there. It was an old distillery, it was Victorian, the smells were just addictive in the stillhouse and all that, and then when Bruichladdich closed, it was a disaster for that part of the island. People said Bruichladdich was not a true Islay because it wasn't peated.
Yeah.
What a load of bollocks that was. It's one of the most beautiful spirits ever created in the history of whiskey. And so they closed Bruichladdich, people lost their jobs, the distillery fell into disrepair, and I used to look across the lock and think, Jesus, that's not fair, you know. So when Sir John asked me, it took me about 3 seconds to say, yes, I'm coming. He said, he said to me, do you not want to think about it? I said, I've been thinking about it for the last 12 years.
Yeah. So I mean, it closed in '94, and I think Mark and Sir John put the team together, and it opened again in early 2001, was it?
That's right, 2001.
Yeah. So, look, we obviously Mark has been an adopted Irishman, and I'm sure he'd love to hear that. But we'll play a clip here of Mark's philosophy on whiskey, and just get people's a bit of a cross section of the movie here as well. So, we'll play that.
Here at Waterford, we've been running a series of tests on 2 sites, 2 different varieties of barley. We can identify and prove precisely exactly where our barley was grown, who by, how they grew it, what soil, when it was harvested, who harvested it, inside leg measurement of the guy that harvested it, absolutely everything.
So that's obviously somebody you spent a lot of time working with. I mean, Bruichladdich being bought by Mark and setting up the team to buy it is a whole story in itself. I mean,
fantastic, yeah.
And the persistence. There are a couple of things that struck me. One, the coincidence that he won the bottle from Jack Milroy.
Yeah.
Well, that was hugely coincidental, and then his persistence for 10 years solid to be chasing Beam for 10 years to try and get the distillery, and eventually it came through. How did you get on with Mark initially, and what did you think of this guy from the south of England coming up and telling us how to make scotch? No,
he never did that. To be given his credit, he did not attempt to tell us how to make whiskey or tell us how to make gin. He was fantastic, a very determined man, very quick on the trigger. You know, him and I had many battles, and because we're both passionate about it. And So we clashed many, many times, but we were in the same hymn sheet. We wanted to make Bruichladdich one of the great whiskies of Islay, one of the great Islay whiskies. We had to do that because there was no history of Bruichladdich, even though it had been built, since 1881. So we clashed quite often, but I was just like that, and then we go our separate ways. He knew what I was doing, and I knew what he was doing. So, as I say, it was quite stormy at sometimes, but we were both heading in the same direction. We both knew what we wanted to make Bruichladdich a really superb distillery that could stand beside any whiskey in the world. We knew that, and we had to convince the world about that. And you can only do that for me to produce a great whiskey. And then they said, you can only make one whiskey in one distillery. So I made Port Charlotte, and I made Dr. Moore. So that now everybody's doing that. They're in different style. So Mark and I had, we had a fairly good relationship. We had a lot of battles, as I said earlier, but on the whole, we both had the same aim to make Bruichladdich #1.
Yeah, I mean, I keep on going on to the series of things that came into place to make this happen. So one, obviously winning the bottle that got him interested in Bruichladdich, and then his persistence, and then coming with you, in which there were two big personalities, both driven for success, and you seem to actually bounce off each other and drive the company forward. I mean, I highly doubt Bruichladdich would have become the success it had a large multinational come in and bought over.
I agree 100%. And Simon Coughlin, who's Mark's partner in London in the wine store, Simon was brilliant. He was a good pacifier between myself and Mark, and his knowledge of wine and Mark's knowledge of wine was great. Very good accountant. So Simon was there as well. So it wasn't just me and Mark. Simon was a kind of buffer between the two of us. He would see logic. But we got along fine. We were both following the same dream, but from a different angle.
Yeah. Well, I think that propelled everything forward. Sometimes it could actually be the demise of everything. In this case, it really propelled it forward. And then the other element of it that I noticed, particularly in the movie, was that you inherited old stock that was dead.
Yeah.
And a necessity and a smaller company led to the creativity for you guys to actually develop finishing wine casks and the huge range of different casks. And again, that may not have happened had you had the resources of a big company.
Well, with Mark and Simon's knowledge of wine, and they were bringing in the great wines from France, you know what I mean? And when they first arrived, I had been used to working with sherry casks, because that's all the Scots did. It was bourbon or sherry, end of story. And then Mark started bringing in the Latours, the Lafitte, the Chems, the Barolo, Barbaresco, Sassicaia, Amarone. He was getting them all. And I was transferring from bourbon casks that were not very good, putting the whiskey into these wine casks. And the results were amazing. It was a whole new range of single malt. It was just some of the colours and the fruit flavours coming through, mixing with the oak. It was just, in Chateau d'Yquem, my God, you can't get a better Sauterne wine. You put the whiskey into it for 6 months and you've got a whole new product, product range.
There's a question in here from Cask Chasers. Was it more difficult to figure out what to do with the old stock or what the new make would be like?
It wasn't difficult to deal with the old stock. You just had to buy new casks. So that was a no-brainer and give it more time. And that was not difficult. And we did that. We bought a lot of fresh bourbon casks in. We bought stuff from Spain and a lot of wine casks from all over. And no, it wasn't difficult at all. It was actually a pleasure to take a brilliant whiskey from a cask that's dead and put it into something alive again. It was it was great. It was fantastic, and the results happened very quickly because the spirit was maturing. It lacked in colour, it lacked in flavour, it lacked in personality. The spirit was maturing, but it lacked these characters. So by recasting, we introduced that to the spirit again. It was easy. What was the second part of that question?
The second part was about what did you know, or
the new make.
The new make. What was your decisions and what was it like to develop the new make for Bruichladdich?
That was just a walk in the park. That was like winning the national lottery because there was this consensus in the world of whiskey that Bruichladdich was not a true Islay because it wasn't peated. Do you ever hear such bullshit in your life? So I decided to make a heavy peated malt, about 40 parts per million, between 40 and 50, and I made Port Charlotte. That was on level with the rest of the Islas. Yeah. And then I thought, I'm going to shoot for the moon. I'm going to try and produce the most heavy peated malt the world has ever known. And I got the technique. I used to drive up to Glasgow and I'd stop in at a little fish shop just outside Inverary and I'd buy kippers. And I'd sit in there and the guy was smoking the kippers. There was no heat. You understand? It was just smoke that was smoking. Yeah. And so I thought, and I had so much freedom. So I spoke to the maltster and I said, I would like to make a really super heavy peated malt. He says, right, okay, that's not a problem. I said, but I want it to be higher than anything else. And I said, I just want you to put on small fires when the germinated barley, when the membrane is soft, so the peat can go right into the heart of the plant. You understand? Once you put on the heat, you seal it, and the smoke can't get in. You follow me? Just say yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I asked him to smoke it for 3 days. Normally smoking is 24 hours. So I asked him to smoke it for 3 days, just with very little heat. He says, it's going to cost a lot of money. I said, well, we'll just have to worry about that at a later stage. So we did it, and that was the creation of Octomore. Sorry. And we went from the highest peaking level being about 40. The first batch we did went from a regular Islay 40 parts per million. We hit 168 parts per million. I mean, this was phenomenal. That changed the world forever. People couldn't believe it. And then the thought was, what will it taste like? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. So into the cask it went. It was fabulous, fresh bourbon barrels, absolutely beautiful. You were getting the sweetness of the bourbon, you get the spice of the bourbon, the sweetness of the oak, and this smoke from Octomore and Port Charlotte. People said it can't be done. Well, we've just done it.
Yeah. Was it important to try and push the boundaries, or were you just trying to prove them? Well, you were hearing the others saying, "No, you can't do this." You just wanted to prove them wrong, or did you actually see merit in producing something that's?
It was a bit of. I mean, it's crazy to think you've got a giant plant that can produce 4 million litres or 3 million or 2 million, and you make the one product. For God's sake, when you have that capacity, why can you not make 2 products? Indeed, why can't you make 3? And that helps with sales, you understand? It was such an obvious thing to do. So that's why we did it. And the rest is history. I mean, it was fantastic. And there's people out there, if you've never tasted, and watching this show, if you've never tasted Octomore or Port Charlotte, it's just phenomenal, phenomenal whiskey.
Yeah. I've had the pleasure of trying both of them, and yeah. But strangely enough, the Octomore does have a much higher ppm, but it doesn't kill the drink. I mean, it's not unpalatable at all.
Well, exactly. That comes from slow distillation as well, keeping the oil in the spirit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not running your stills fast. You want a lovely texture in your spirit, and that will absorb that smoke. Sorry, the spirit will absorb that smoke, and it's just takes time, but it's worth it.
There's a question in here from Brittany. He says, "Can you tell us about the Lockendall whiskey? What was that, and what happened to it?"
Well, there was a distillery in Port Charlotte, which was closed down, called Lockendall, and we had some plans to reopen that. So that's in Port Charlotte, 1 mile from Bruichladdich, just down the road. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a well-known distillery, Lockendall, had a great water supply, and we were using the old buildings for storing barrels. So the buildings were still there, the water was still there, and I thought, well, rather than build another distillery, why not resurrect Port Charlotte? Because everything's there. The critical thing is water supply, cold water. So I did some trials at Bruichladdich and what I thought Portcharlotte would be like if we ever opened it. And it was absolutely fantastic. Just about 30 parts per million, while Portcharlotte was 40 parts, slightly lighter, and it turned out brilliant at Bruichladdich. So I had the plan for a Portcharlotte distillery, which is called Loch-and-Dol. However, due to circumstances, whether it be financial or whatever, and we never ever did it. But there was a distillery there which I closed in 1921, so there was a history there. And I had a very good idea of what the whiskey tasted like. There was a lovely old man called Remy McGillivray, and he would pop into the distillery. He had been a stillman there for many years, and he liked a wee dram, you know. So he used to come up and see me, and I'd pour him a dram, and we'd have a chat about this and that and the weather. And I would say, Rory, would you like a wee dram? And then he would play this game with me. Well, Jim, I'm not sure. Would you like a dram, Rory? Well, I'll need to think about it. And then he'd say, well, okay then. But he never said okay right away, you know what I mean? So, and I said to him one day, I said, Rory, can you remember the whiskey from Loch-and-Dol? Because he's an old man. And he put his hand on his chin and he says, well, Jim, he said, I can remember it. I said, could you tell me? Because I'm going to try and make it. He says, well, Jim, I can remember it well. Could you give me another dram? And maybe my memory will come, you know, Jim. So I gave him another dram. And he said, Jim, yes, we'll tell you about Loch-and-Dol. He said, it was good.
That was it.
It was good. He finished his dram and he walked out the door, and I'm thinking, shit, it was good. Oh,
you were duped. You were duped. Well, maybe there's a future in that distillery down the road. You never know. You know?
Yeah.
What was the reason that and when, of course, Bruichladdich came for sale and was sold, what were your feelings about it? And I know Mark had different feelings, possibly, but what were your feeling about the distillery being sold to Remy Cointreau at the time?
It was mixed feelings. I knew that Remy, because of the quality of their cognac, etc., were a company who knew all about quality. Remy are synonymous with quality. There's no doubt about that. They were a wealthy company. You know it and I know it. You just look at their packaging, their bottles are fabulous. There's nothing left. There's nothing cheap about Remy. They're a blue chip company. And we all went to France and we met with them. And it was very apparent from the very beginning that they would give Bruichladdich the same love as what they were doing for the cognac. It was there. They understood it. And so Bruichladdich needed quite a lot of repair work and new stills and stuff like that. It needed some money spent on it, and it was going to take a long time. But to do that the way we were going, but we were doing fine. However, the shareholders decided they wanted to sell it to Remy.
Yeah.
That was it. They all got a very good return on their shares. Myself, I would have been happy to carry on just the way it was, but there's nothing I can do to stop it. I'm not in that position. I was a production director, not a financial director, but Remy have been absolutely phenomenal since they come in. They spent a lot of money in the bottling hall. When I started at Bruichladdich, there was me, 2 men, and a dog named Boo.
Yeah.
Today, there's about 85 people working over there. That's 85 families. That's children going to the local school. That's keeping the local shop open. The economy of the west coast of Ireland is much improved. People have got cars now. 84 people working in that distillery, bottled in Islay, using Islay water, 100% Islay. Bruichladdich is the real deal. But 84 jobs is significant, really.
Well, that's what struck me. That was one of the things that struck me in the movie, actually, was when you did comment about it, the first comment you made about it was it secures the work for the people that are going to be there, and it gives them a good future. It means people don't have to leave the island. And so
that's it.
You're very much a people-driven person and very much an instinctive person in in your judgment of people and in your trust in people. So, I mean, again, you gave people an opportunity without really knowing them that well, you know. So you took on Alan and Adam, you know, just from a very casual conversation, if you know. Okay, I think you might have taught football to one of them, but that was it.
Yeah. Well, Adam and Alan, on Islay, you know everybody, right? You know their family, you know where they've been to jail, and nobody goes from Islay goes to jail because we're not criminals. You know everything about them, which sometimes is a good thing and sometimes it's not. But I knew Alan I used to coach him at football, and he was a goalkeeper. A nice, quiet man, gentle. Adam, right as a button, very gentle man as well, quiet. We don't want bullies. The last thing you want is a boss that's kicking ass. You want people that can speak in equal terms to the workforce. And both these guys did the mashing, they did the distilling, they did the warehouse, and so they knew exactly how every part of the distillery worked. Yeah. And as I say, Alan came from a family of distillers, but a gentle giant, one of the nicest people you could ever possibly meet, and a great distiller. Yeah. Adam was by my side when I was selecting casks all the time. I take samples and I nose the sample and I say, Adam, it needs another 6 months. Take a note of that. Adam, this one's ready. Take a note of that. So he was like my assistant in the warehouse, and nosing and tasting and all that sort of stuff. He had done his mashing, done his distilling, I learned it all. Yeah. So it's great to hand on to young guys because they would have some longevity and they care. Yeah. And the one thing that the common bond between these two guys is they're not boastful. I mean, I can talk the hind legs off a donkey, you know, but that's what you do when you're in the PR business. I mean, go around the bloody world trying to impress people. But these two guys had a nice quietness about them and very sincere people. So Bruichladdich is in great hands. And I'm so proud of these guys because they were my boys. Yeah. And also, there was one other guy there who's no longer with us, probably the most important man of all. That was the late, great Duncan McGillivray, who had been the assistant manager. The most talented man I've ever met in terms of engineering and knowledge of distilling. And I was so lucky. He was my running mate throughout my time at Bruichladdich. And we had so much fun. He was the wittiest, cleverest guy. But Duncan actually more or less rebuilt Bruichladdich by himself using old bits of pipe and welding and all that. So if there's any credit to be given to anybody, Mark got the money and I did my bit. But at the end of the day, it was Duncan McGillivray and the Allens and the Adams and a few other guys put that distillery back together again in some shape and form so that we could produce whiskey. And once we started producing whiskey, then the lights came on. We had a commodity. So this interview would be not the same if I didn't mention Duncan, because he was my right hand, my left hand. He was the beating heart of Bruichladdich. Yeah. Super guy.
Yeah, I think, and the movie does give it a slight nod to him, I think, as well, which was nice. So
a very witty man. He was so witty. He was like a joy to work with. He really was a joy to work with. And he could tell you a lie. He would tell you a lie just like that. He would kid you on. You know what I mean? Oh, Jesus. What a guy.
One thing you did mention is you got a lot of freedom in Bruichladdich to be able to produce whatever you wanted. And you went on and you did the Black Art, you did the Octomore Port Charlottes, and then I don't know how many releases of Bruichladdich there were, but there was one almost every couple of weeks. What did you take away from Bruichladdich? And then when you did leave, was it a difficult decision to leave?
Not really. My time was up. And it's time to move over and give the young guys a chance. The most significant thing I created was the Botanist gin. Because gin, you make it today, you sell it tomorrow, right? Yeah. So I traveled down to a gin distiller in Birmingham, and I spent 10 days learning how to make gin. And so I came back up, and Mark knew about it, Simon knew about it, Chairman knew about it. We were short of cash. If I can make gin, we can make it today, sell it tomorrow, but it must be a high quality gin. So I got the when I was in Birmingham, I learned all about the botanicals. What's we call the juniper, the coriander, the licorice, the aniseed, and all that sort of stuff. And the people in Birmingham were very good. They taught me well. I brought down about 4 cases of whiskey. That certainly helped them, but it helped me. Never go into hand. Oh, by the way, I brought a whiskey for you. Whiskey is the greatest currency in the world. I mean, it's better than the dollar. It's better than gas. A bottle of whiskey will get you in it, particularly cinnamon. So the guys down there, I picked it up very quickly what they were doing. The whole thing about gin is a recipe to give that unique taste, and had a good idea of what I was looking for. But the best bit was there was 2 botanists living on the island, lovely couple, Richard and Mavis. So I approached them and I said, look, I'm going to try and make some gin, and I want to use Islay botanicals. Islay is probably one of the most beautiful islands for botanicals ever, and they came on board right away. Very, very qualified botanists. So I had my own recipe. I learned in Birmingham the percentages, and I changed them to my own style. And the botanist went round. Sir John McTaggart was great, our chairman. He owned a large chunk of land, so they could walk through there and pick the botanicals in season. I always say that the botanist gin is a seasonal gin. It'll taste slightly different in the winter from the summer, because of botanicals. And I got an old still and set off to make gin, and got it right first time. Bang! It just happened like that, and it came down. It was absolutely clear. Smell was amazing. Taste was amazing. That changed life for everybody at Bruichladdich. We now had a product made today, bottled tomorrow, on the ferry on Wednesday, and hitting Europe in a week's time. The Botanist gin gave us the wherewithal to improve the distillery, to get things fixed, and to get new plant and new equipment. But the key thing was the directors all agreed to bottle at Bruichladdich. Rather than sending tanks to a bottling plant in Glasgow, do an Islay. That provides jobs for many people. And these people love working in the bottling hall. The atmosphere in the bottling hall is wonderful. You go in there and they're all happy. So that was probably one of the most important moments in Bruichladdich history, the creation of the gin, providing the cash to make more whiskey.
Yeah.
Profit.
And what about the development of, or the redevelopment, if you like, of growing barley for distillation on Islay? Bruichladdich had a significant part to play in that.
Yeah, we did, and the directors were very much for it, and particularly Mark, he was really on board with that. He was about terroir. He's coming from the French side of it, the soil in France and Brittany and Bordeaux and all that sort of stuff. And I remember speaking to 2 farmers at the very beginning. This would be probably about 2004, 2005, and asked them to grow barley for us. And they agreed, and slowly but surely more farmers came on board. And it was great for the farmers because it brought them an income guaranteed every year.
Yeah.
They were depending on sheep and cattle and all that stuff, and veterinary bills and the whole lot. So I think there's probably about a dozen, maybe more. I don't know. If I'm wrong, somebody will put me right. I think there's probably about a dozen or more farmers growing barley on Islay. And it's fantastic when the season is right and it's harvest time. Islay is now where it was once Islay barley, where it was once heather and moor, it's now barley fields, golden barley fields. So with employment in Islay, and that's families are getting salaries out of it. Farmers, farmers are always struggling for cash. So the gin was a major, major move, and it's one of the top gins in the world now. It really, really is.
That's fantastic. No, it's great to see what whiskey can mean to a community in terms of employment, but in terms of social life, in terms of, employment and economy, it's fantastic. Just a quick one here again, Brittany. How excited were you when you met Jim for the first time? And how did you manage to pretend you're keeping your cool? That's a bit how I feel now as well. So
I won't. I'll never admit. I think Jim. I think we met for the first time. I think at Ardnahoe. Did we not?
That's right. Yeah.
Or maybe I can't. in either case, I know we'd spoken before. I may have come to your house before we went and
I think
interviewed you at Ardnahoe.
Yeah. But it was a great meeting because we hit it off right away.
Yeah, and
I could see your vision. You were explaining very clearly what you were trying to do. I want to take this to the world, and you've done it, Greg. Credit to you. You've done a phenomenal job on that. You've done a good job for Ireland, not just for Bruichladdich or me or the people. You've done a great job for Ireland. I wish to thank you for that because you've put Ireland on the map. It was always on the map, but people had never seen it in the format that you've produced. Some of the shots on the drones were just amazing. It's a beautiful movie. It really, really is. So thank you on behalf of all the people of Ireland, sincerely. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's funny. I've learned when I go to do interviews now, I always try to take Fonzie with me because everyone always wants to talk about the drone shots. He's our drone pilot, Sergio.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
And he's great. And and we actually operated as two separate teams where the whole crew would go do our interviews, and we would send him Alphonse off on his own. We gave him a list every day of what to shoot on the drone.
Yeah.
And then every day we'd sit at the house and just watch the footage, and we're just, amazed. And it's just a whole new perspective on a place. That's the thing about drones that's great. That's really changed filmmaking is that, like Jim, you've lived on Islay most of your life, and you probably had never, you've seen other drone shots, but I'm saying like it's a whole new perspective on stuff you're used to. You've never seen it, but and it really lent a huge amount to the film, and we were really lucky to have it. But but as far as meeting Jim, I mean, I think we got along very well really quickly, and therefore I think I got over any nerves I had.
Yeah. Was there much convincing him to take part in the movie, or was that pretty?
No. I told this story the other day because Rachel McNeil was in one of our Q&As from the Islay Whisky Academy, and here's how we found. This is a great example of Islay. I lived in Glasgow. One of my good friends is a nurse in Glasgow, and I had reached out to her and I said, I want to make this film. I want to do this, and I need to be able to get a hold of Jim McEwan, and I don't know how to do it. And she said, I went to nursing school with a woman from Islay. Let me see if she knows. 4 hours later, I had Jim's phone number and email address.
Yeah.
And it was, it was just. Sorry, go ahead. No, I'm done.
Sorry, I mean, just what was it that you wanted Jim more than anybody else?
I'll tell you what. Honestly, there are two things. One was Bruichladdich. We knew we wanted to tell a story that had a lot of drama to it, and we knew that Bruichladdich had a ton of drama to it. I'll give you an example. We feature Balvenie in the film, and I'm a huge Balvenie fan. I have a bottle of Balvenie sitting next to me. David Stewart is our guest tonight on our final night. Balvenie has never had any drama. I mean, it's been owned by the same family forever. That has an amazing stability. It's never been mothballed, and that's to their to their credit. That's not a criticism. That's to their credit. But we wanted to tell a story that had a lot of rich human drama to it. And Bruichladdich had been mothballed, and then the more we researched it, we realized how negatively it impacted the island when it closed. And whiskey was sort of, Ardbeg was also mothballed. Port Ellen was mothballed. So that really kind of spoke to us as this, had a big, a 3-act structure, if you will, built in. Yeah. And then the thing that really, really, the first day we met Jim, I will give full credit to Leslie Ann. It wasn't me. It was not me. It was our producer, Leslie Ann, was standing there on the hill outside of Ardnahoe. And I was done with my questions. And Leslie Ann said to Jim, what do you think your legacy will be? And Jim didn't say Bruichladdich or Bowmore or Ardnahoe. He said it's the 100 jobs that it's the 100 families who live on Islay that wouldn't be here if we hadn't done what we had done. And at that moment, I knew. I was like, that's the story. That is the way in. That's the this is because I think that's the human element of it. And that's what transcends whiskey. I didn't want to make a film about how to make whiskey. I wanted to make a film about people and passion and craftsmanship. And that was when it all those tumblers all clicked into place at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing again that comes out not only from the movie but from having seen Jim give talks, mostly online. I mean, there's a passion there that comes through in every sinew of his body. I mean, he feels it from his gut right the way through, and it just shows that it means so much to him. How do you keep that enthusiasm going, Jim, after 50 plus years in the business?
Basically, you fall in love, right? I met my wife when she was 14. And I'm not saying what age she is, but she's not 14 anymore. So it's a love affair. And it's like when you get into this distilling business, and it becomes a love affair, because what you're doing, you're creating something that nobody else in the world is creating. How many people get that chance? Count them in one hand or two hands. I had the freedom at Bruichladdich to create whatever I wanted. What a blessing. Mark and Simon supported me all the time. It was really good. Alan and Adam delivered the business. And we went where no single malt had gone before. The Starship Enterprise, to go where no man has gone before. We were the Starship Enterprise. And they still are the Starship Enterprise. It was the freedom.
But that Starship Enterprise and the story of the freedom and the story of the innovation and creativity was born out of not only the creativity and the passion that you have, but also out of necessity in some cases as well, and hardship.
Well, as I said, when at the very start of this movie, when we went into Bruichladdich, we didn't have a pot to piss in. And look at it now. It's just fantastic. But it's a great team. I mean, my fellow islanders who work in distilleries, they all know what I'm talking about. In fact, all the islanders, not just Islay, but there's something about living in an island that makes you slightly different, become slightly more confident, I think, and because you're living on an island and there's certain rules you abide by, you know everybody and all that sort of stuff, and everybody, I mean, God forbid, but when somebody dies on Islay, there's so many people attend the funeral, and when the body is lowered into the grave, guess what we do?
Yeah.
We drink whiskey at the graveside. I mean, it's with us from birth to death. It's just part of our DNA, and we are so fortunate at this island.
Yeah, there's a point in the movie where, and the movie could have been called The Cycle of Life in one sense, because there's a part in the movie where you hand over the reins to Adam in a very similar way to the way that the keys had been given to you by David Bell, and now one was a post-it and one was keys. But how did that feel, handing over the responsibility and saying goodbye to Bruichladdich?
Yeah, well, Adam was in charge of the warehouses, and that's where the keys were for. Alan was running the whole shoot, but Adam was responsible for the casks and the filling and all that sort of stuff. And he used to be with me. He was, every time I was nosing casks, Adam would be by my side. And when we were making up different bottlings, I would create them, and these boys would come in, the two of them, and I say, which sample do you want? There's 5 samples there. I'm creating a new product. Tell me which one you like. And we would come in and they'd choose it. And then I'd switch all the samples around and ask them to come back in. Tell me where it is. You know what I mean? Very simple. We don't need bloody computers. You've got a nose in your head and a tongue between your teeth. Nose it and taste and move it again. And that's how you train them, Find the same sample all the time. And Adam was particularly good at that. Aaron was into the production side of it, the engineering side of it. So they're a great tag team, these two boys. Great tag team. And they're very nice guys as well. They're gentle guys, unlike me.
They're slightly quieter than you, Jim.
Well, sometimes somebody's got to shout. And I've been in this game a long time. Yeah. This has been 57 years. And I will always be shouting about single malt. I'll always be shouting about Islay. And I will always be shouting about Scotland, because when you're in that position, whether it be New York or Tokyo, Osaka, Kobe, it doesn't matter, Seoul, Korea, going around the world, what am I doing? What am I talking about? I'm not talking about Bruichladdich or Charlotte or Ardnahoe. I'm talking about Scotland and its whiskies. It's not just our whiskies, the great whiskies that are out there. So I took that very, very seriously. If you don't like mine, you'll like something else, because there's lots of good stuff up there. Have you tried Glenfarclas, or have you tried Balvenie, or have you tried, So that's how us whiskey guys feel.
No, you are very much an ambassador for Scotland, not just Well, in particular, Islay, of course, but very much for Scotland, and not only Scotch whiskey. I think Scotland in a broader sense as well. You know, from a tourism point of view, from cultural point of view, it's not only the whiskey. Of course, whiskey plays a huge part, but I think that's one of the really nice things that you do as a brand ambassador for the spirit.
Yeah. Well, as I said,
gentlemen, if I can interrupt for one moment, I'm loath to leave here, but I'm going to have to go in a moment. Our event starts, and I need to be in our back room area in 4 minutes. So we're going to start our final night.
Well, look, Greg,
I could talk to you guys all night. I happily would. I'm sorry, but my team will kill me. I've been getting loads of messages that they're expecting me. So
Greg, well, we've done 1 hour 10 minutes. We've been talking for 1 hour 10 minutes.
I know it flew by for me. I love your stories, Jim, and I could just listen to them all night. So
no, it's been a pleasure having the show.
But I will let you guys, wrap it up at your own leisure.
Well,
but
Greg, congratulations on a fantastic movie. Genuinely mean that. It's a tearjerker. It's a optimistic movie, but it really gets into the soul of humankind, I think. And I look forward to your next movie, and I wish you every success with this. And thank you for joining us.
Oh, hopefully we'll come to Ireland and do one there. I mean that too. I know you and I have talked about it.
Yeah, we'll.
There's a nice tease.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
all right.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, Jim, it's just me and you now. I have you cornered for a little bit longer, do I? Because there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So there's one question in here from Colin Mayers. He's asking, do you think some of the resistance to considering terroir in whiskey is because of the use of a French and wine-related term?
Yeah, I think there would be some people it's terroir, it's a French thing, but I mean, the soil in Islay is different to the soil in the Highlands, as is different to the Speyside. We all know that, and the word terroir is, it's much played upon. It's just a French word for the land.
Yeah.
And it's a good question, and the guy's quite right to ask it.
Yeah,
I can take samples of whiskey from before the farmers joined us, and I can take samples of whiskey after the farmers from Islay joined us. There's a distinctive difference between the two spirits, from the barley grown in Perthshire or up that way, and the stuff in Islay. It's quite different.
Yeah. And I think, well, for Irish whiskey, certainly Mark is championing terroir.
Yeah, he's done a good job over there. He's done a good job.
Actually, well, that's a good question perhaps to ask is, what do you think about Irish whiskey from Graham Fraser?
Well, I've judged it many times as an international judge. That was one of the, and I'm still looking at some of the stuff here. I mean, some of the names are great, like Royal Oak and Great Northern and Waterford and Ballykeel and Blackwater and Burren and Clonakilty and Dingle. I mean, there's now, I think, 24 distilleries that have been built in Ireland since 2014.
Since 2014.
24 distilleries since 2014. We're on the rise, but Irish whiskey is on the rise and rise. I mean, absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. I reckon.
What do you think Irish whiskey can learn from Scotch whiskey and Islay whiskey? What piece of advice would you, if you were to give to the new distillers starting here in Ireland, what one piece of advice could you give them that would be useful?
Well, it's quite easy to answer, actually. You must buy the best barley you can. You must buy the best cask you can. Because what you're doing, you're going to create a child. The spirit is the child and the cask is the mother.
Yeah.
They've got to be together for at least 10 years. Some whiskies get bottled at 5 and all that sort of stuff. So the most important thing, really, they will all make good whiskey. If they don't make good whiskey, they'll be found out fairly soon. The consumer is the judge. If it doesn't sell, it's not good. They may think it's good, but if they're not making the numbers because it doesn't taste right, it will die a natural death. Most people who come into the distilling industry have a good knowledge of distilling. I mean, it's been around a long time, let's face it. The Egyptians started it to distill water so they could conquer the world. They took salt water and boiled it, caught it in sponges and wrung it out, and that's how that's how they conquered the world. Now I think the future is very, very good, and anybody that's making whiskey, we all know the quality of what the other guy's doing, and everybody's doing their very, very best. Making whiskey is easy. It's the cask that's important. You're making this spirit that's going into a cask. If the cask is tired or dead or whatever, it's never going to mature properly. So as a former cooper, I know the value of the cask. But there's nobody in Scotland, and indeed Ireland, I haven't come across a poor whiskey for a long, long time. We're getting better and better and better. The distilling techniques are better than before. You can use gastrometry now.
I thought this was to be finished at 8:30.
I'm just coming. Keep offering me more money, Barbara. I'm sorry. What was that? 2,500 a month now, Barbara. She says, I hope you're making money. I think Irish whiskey is great. I've judged it. I've been a judge at International Wine Spirit Competition. I've been judging chairman at International Spirit Challenge. I've judged Irish whiskey for years. Absolutely terrific. Absolutely. It's got a big, big future. It's completely different to Scotch. Completely different.
Yeah.
One
very quick one. You finished up in Bruichladdich, and then you couldn't sit in your laurels and relax. You started Ardnahoe.
Well,
you were involved in Ardnahoe.
I was involved in the design. I wanted to make Ardnahoe slightly different. So the first thing I thought about making it different was to put line arms into a worm tub. So Ardnahoe is the only distillery in Ireland that uses a worm tub for cooling the vapour. So that was, and they bought into it. The family were very good, the Lane family, absolutely fantastic. The designer who designed the distillery was great. I helped with the design of the stills. It was a real treat to be involved in that. And when the first spirit came down the line, it was Fraser Hughes and David Livingston. They were the two managers there, and we're standing there waiting on it. It's like being in a maternity ward. Your wife's in labour, and you think, oh, well, we get some whiskey off the first run. When's it coming? Is it this time or the next time? And it came after about the fourth run. We have to get low wines in our feints and all that. And it was just one of these great moments, having been in the whiskey industry a long time, to actually be a guy who's creating with the other boys, not just me, a team. And this spirit came down and it just cleared. And it's very simple. How do you know it's right? Well, there's no computers required. You take a sample in your glass, you add the water to it. If it remains clear, you have found the middle cut. If it goes cloudy, you have not found the middle cut. Why do we need computers when you can do it with your nose and your tongue and a little bit of whiskey and water in the glass? It's that simple. But it's that moment when you add the water to the sample from the spirit seed and it stays clear. It's like watching your children being born. It was like, oh, we've done it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this one was an interesting one because you were involved from the very offset of this distillery. So that's Hunt Laying independent bottlers that were involved in setting this up. But
yeah, great company.
You were there from day one with this, though.
I'm sorry?
You were involved from day one with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to make it slightly different. The site, the Lane, Stuart Lane and his family had bought was beautiful, overlooking the island of Jura. Phenomenal site, probably one of the most beautiful sites in the world for a distillery. There's a loch right beside it. Everything was just perfect. Yeah. So you've got to have a point of difference. You know, not all distilleries the same. So the still shape was classic still shape, but I wanted to do the longest line arms. That's the bit that comes off the top where the vapor runs along, and put it into worm tubs, which is going back in time before we had the modern condensers. And the guys agreed to do it. And it was great. Slow distillation going through the worm tub and the cold water trickling in there. And I can remember clearly when adding the water to it, it was cloudy. adding water to spirit, and then suddenly, bang, it came. It was like watching my first child being born again. This was just one of the great moments of life. I've been in lots of distilleries, but I've never, ever been in a distillery where it has made whiskey for the very first time. Bowmore was 1779, Bruichladdich was 1881. So this was a great moment for me and the family, but particularly for myself. They were great to work with. Great team up there. It's going to be one of Islay's new giants. The spirit is absolutely sensational. I recommend.
I think that's the ninth distillery on Islay now at the moment.
That's right. And it's absolutely well worth a visit. Really beautiful views. So now the distilleries are really doing well. They're all doing, Bowmore's doing great. Lagavulin and Freuger, Beg, they are now top of the world in terms of whiskey terms. You know, Kalila's doing great. Bunnahabhain, probably one of the best whiskies I ever tasted in 57 years was a Bunnahabhain, 30-year-old. And all of those sherry cask at 30 years and all of it. It was just like, oh my, I've got to die. Take me now, God. This is the best whiskey. That was Bunnahabhain. Great spirit. So Islay is doing
very
well.
underrated Bunnahabhain for some reason in terms of mass appeal. I don't know why.
I'm sorry?
It hasn't got the wide name Bunnahabhain that some of the other brands like from Islay do.
Well, Bunnahabhain is a non-peated, primarily non-peated, but they also do a peated one, which is great as well. So they, like Bruichladdich, they can do peated or unpeated. It's one of the great whiskies of the world. Huge copper pot stills, beautiful location, good distillers. And it's all about the cask. As I said to you before, I mean, you can be a great distiller, but if you put it in a cask that's dead, it's just totally wasting 10 years. You know, it's just so. Make the investment in the barrel day one, and that barrel can be filled again. So it's all about the cask. Good quality spirit. Once you get it right, don't change it. And actually, we did what we at Bruichladdich, we made Bruichladdich, Charlotte, Optimore, Loch-and-Daw. We had that freedom, you know.
Well, as if that wasn't enough, Jim, then you decided to make your way to the other side of the world and get involved in a project. And let's see where that is. Hold on. So this is Cape Byron Distillery in Byron Bay, Australia.
That's it.
So how did that come about, and when are they going to be producing, and what are they going to be producing?
Right, just a second. I'm going to close the window here. The wind's getting up. Yeah. How did I get involved?
Yes. I mean, I know Eddie used to work with you, Eddie Brook.
He was, when I was doing, when I was traveling big time, he would be my tour manager. So I'd be going to all the cities and throughout Australia, or just everywhere, doing tastings and teaching and tasting. And Eddie was responsible for my hotels, my flights, the whole lot, and he assisted me throughout. Absolutely fabulous guy, really, really fabulous. The whole family's great, his dad and mom and his brother. Just great, great people, so kind, and they were very, very good to me. And they had this beautiful piece of land quite close to Byron Bay, and there's all this, you can see the pictures, tropical forest and all that stuff, and Eddie was telling me stories about it. And we were sitting having a couple of drams one night, and I said, why don't you make a distillery? Have you got water? He said, yeah, we've got the water, we've got everything, you know. So that kicked it off, and they got the still made in Tasmania. There's a guy down there, a German guy making stills in Tasmania. That was great. Got the foundations done. Of course, it's very, very hot there, so there's going to be a lot of evaporation from the cask, but it'll mature very quickly. And so we got the still shipped over from Tasmania, got it in, got it going. I only had one still to work with, so I had to do the wash distillation and empty the still and do the low wines and faints in the same still. So it was very, very difficult, and that's all changed now, a new boiler and all that. But once again, it's that magic moment when you get the middle cut coming down the line. And oh my God, it was just sensational, absolutely sensational spirit. one of the finest spirits we've ever made. You can see the shape of the still. You see the box and the neck of the still. You see the picture.
Very sharp. Yeah.
We also made gin, Byron Bay gin. And I put botanicals in that box.
Yeah, they go into a little basket bag or something, and then
in there. Yeah, and also inside the still, we put the botanicals in that botanical basket, and inside the still, I got them to put 4 hooks hanging from the shoulders of the still, and what we would do, get special bags that could stand the heat, and we'd put. I call them Babylon bags because that's where the stuff from the gardens are coming. The Babylon bags, the gardens, all the different plants. We put them in just above the boil. So when the still was boiling, the bags were filled with all the botanicals from the rainforest, which is in abundance, and it's seasonal.
So it must be so different so different to the one that you made in Islay.
Oh yeah. Totally different, absolutely different botanicals. It's still the same base. The main thing with gin is juniper, coriander, licorice, aniseed. They're the big players, but it's the subtle stuff. The stuff in Islay was completely different to the Byron Bay. You can imagine the temperature down there. So it's always a bit nerve-wracking when you're waiting and coming through the first time. So I never thought of this before, but I put the hooks inside so the alcohol is boiling. Lots and lots of botanicals in the Babylon bags. As the vapor is rising, it's going through these bags and it's stripping out the aromas and the flavor and the texture. And it worked a treat. Absolutely beautiful. So that was great. We got the Byron Bay gin, which is one of the top sellers, particularly on the Gold Coast, which is a surfer's paradise and drink a lot of gin. Yeah. And then we thought, well, why don't we make some whiskey? And I went down there and made some whiskey, and it was good. In fact, it was great. And because of the heat down there, the maturation is going to be super quick, as I said to you a few moments ago. That'll be ready for drinking at 3 years, and it'll taste like a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old. So there's a lot of people employed there now. I think we've got 80 people working, and they do the bottling there, the labelling, the packaging, and it's a family.
Amazing story. Yeah, it's an amazing story. This photo isn't of you in Islay, that's for sure.
No, that's just outside the distillery, which I fell in love with it. I would just, in the evening, I would just wander off myself. And I would always ask there was one huge stone in the middle of the forest. So I'd wander in there exhausted at the end of the day. And I was just sitting this stone. You don't see it there. And I would say to myself, I was missing my family, missing my wife and all that. I was there a long time. And this paradise, and I'm asking myself the question, Jim McEwan, where did it all go wrong for you?
Well, here's a question I was about to ask, actually, and this is Aaron Pross, and he's saying, does Jim ever intend to retire fully, or does he think he will continue to distill, consult, experiment, and push the envelope forever and ever? Amen.
I would like to think I will retire soon. Really.
I've been hearing that for a very long time, Jim. But
well, the fact of the matter is, I'm still enjoying it.
Yes,
this is not work. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it. I've got a very understanding wife. We've been together since she was 14 and I was 16, so we know each other quite well now. I can't answer that question, Aaron. I can't answer that question. Right now, I'm feeling good. Should I not feel well? I'm always happy to talk to people, and I write tasting notes for all sorts of people. I never get paid for it. Not that I want to. I'm quite happy to promote the product and all that sort of stuff. So I think I'll always be doing something until they put me in the box, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's evident.
I'm not going for cremation because it'd be too quick. All the alcohol I've got inside me, it'd be 2 seconds. It was all over.
Good. Well, you are engaging, or you have engaged in another project, and we're going to see the fruits of that over the next couple of months. So you have engaged and created a book that will be coming out later on in Germany in a couple of months' time.
That's right. It's called a Journeyman's Journey. A journeyman is it's the old name for a tradesman. And I found it very, very difficult. I found it extremely emotional, walking back through my life and writing it down. My wife Barbara was superb. She did all the typing and all that sort of stuff. And once you start that journey, lots of things you hadn't thought about for a long, long time come into your head, and people you hadn't thought about for a long, long time come into your head, and suddenly the journey takes longer because you want to mention them. You understand, because they were significant in my life, and I found it so emotional at sometimes. I'm almost in tears talking about my own story, but it's not me I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who helped me and treated me with respect. And
but you're incredibly generous of your praise for those people, and incredibly grateful, I can say, for the opportunities that they've given you, and you get very emotional about it. And I think that reflects in the whiskey that you produce. I know that the basic ingredients are the 3 basic ingredients, but without a bit of passion, a bit of love, and a bit of emotion, what's whiskey?
Exactly. It's a drink to be enjoyed. So I'm doing the book. I've signed up by a wonderful German company, and they get it. They understand it. I've got a translator here who lives in Beaumont, so we go through it and help with them the translation of the words and all that stuff. It's going to be a beautiful book. They're using the top paper. It's going to have a leather-bound cover. We're going to produce a special whiskey as well to go with the book.
Oh, fantastic.
So it should be launching, I would reckon, probably after the summer, September, October. Maybe before then, I don't know.
Do we expect to see that in English as well soon?
Yeah, definitely. The first the first print is going to be in German, and it's going to come out in English as well. And I found that hell of a emotional. It's okay talking to a camera with people like you, Sergio, but when you're going down and you think back in some of the hard times in life, and and you got to get it out. And to put it into writing, some of the stuff you would never have told anyone for whatever reason. Because you weren't proud of it, or there were circumstances or whatever. I found it difficult, very, very emotional, but I did it anyway. I just went, open your soul and say, this is me.
Well, the power of the written word is something very special. I don't know, it's like black and white photography and color photography. Black and white kind of invokes something that, and writing something down and it's a physical activity that relates to something. It's less passive, I think. But so what's for the future after this? You have an incredible energy. And we were talking earlier with a friend of mine.
Okay. Sergio, I'm looking at some of the mail coming in, and somebody's come in and said, Greg Swartz, you can continue with Jim if need be. And Irish Whiskey magazine said he could go on all night. And Greg Swartz says he will. Wait till I see that swine, I'll tell you. I'm reading this down. I was complaining. I will go on. I'm talking too long. So Greg's saying it's time to wrap it, I think.
I think we should wrap it. Yeah, I think we'll wrap it. What I'd like to do, if I
would. What was that last question? Sorry.
Oh, what's in store for you next?
To spend more time, I think, with my grandchildren and my children. Once this COVID is over, because we haven't seen them, we're just Skyping because they live in the mainland, so I haven't heard of my grandchildren since COVID started, and so we're coming up to my golden wedding anniversary, so we're going to get the whole clan together.
Brilliant.
And that's going to be amazing. So I've been very, very fortunate, and my choice of wife, Barbara's been outstanding. We've been married now for 50 years almost, and I would say she was the star of the show. She wasn't me. She put up with all the travel, bringing the kids up herself. Me coming home exhausted and jet lagged and all that stuff. So without her, I would have achieved nothing.
Well, that's very generous of you. And look, I think what I wanted to do was actually end the show. I want to play a little clip, then we'll have a quick chat. There's a nice clip here from the movie I'd like to play.
Yeah.
And we won't keep you long. So
no, you're okay. I'm okay.
We don't want Greg to be. So I think this is quite apt.
Fair fall your sunset face, great chieftain of the pudding race. I bin the ma ye take your place, painch tripe or thern. Weel are ye worthy o' a grace as langs my airn. The groaning trencher there ye fill, your hurdy's like a distant hill. Your pin would help to mend a mill in time o' need, while through your pores the dews distill like amber bead. His knife see rustic labour dight, and cut you up with ready slight, trenching your gushing entrails bright like ony ditch. And then, oh, what a glorious sight, warm, reeking, rich. Horn for horn they stretch and strive, deal tag the hindmost on they drive, till a' their wheel-swelled kites belive are bent like drums. The old good man mayst like to rive, bethank it hums. Is there that o'er his French ragout, or olio that would staw a sou, or fricassee would mac or spew with perfect scunner? Looks doon with sneering, scornful view on sic a dinner. Poor devil, see him o'er his trash, as feckless as a withered rash, his spindle shank a good whip lash, his neve a knit, through bloody flood or field to dash. Oh, how unfit! But mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread, clapping his wally neve a blade he'll mak it whistle, and legs and arms and heads will sned like taps o' thistle. Ye powers wha mak mankind your care, and dish 'em out their bill of fare. All Scotland wants nae skinking ware that joups in luggies. But if ye wish her grateful prayer, gie her a haggis.
I'm sure you're never tired of hearing that one, Jim.
Oh, that was wonderful. That was beautiful. Really, really beautiful, Sergio. It was fantastic. Yeah, great shots.
Well, I know it's a fantastic movie. It was told by a fantastic director, and it starred a fantastic centerpiece and a great ambassador for Islay, for Scotch whiskey, for whiskey worldwide, actually, because you know you are a legend and you are so highly respected in the industry. And for me, yeah, the whiskeys are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but the human stories, the respect you have for your co-workers and those that have brought you to where you are, and of the island and the pride that you show for the island, that's just so engaging and really human story that whiskey helps us transcend. So thank you for coming on the show. I don't know if you want to end on any note in particular, but it's been an honor to have you on the show. We're kind of blown away that you would take the time to be on with us.
Well, Sergio, I would like to thank you for inviting me on. I've loved working with you. And I mean,
this isn't work, Jim, I hope.
No, sorry, I enjoyed the discussion with you because there was an empathy between us. You know, understand that maybe that Celtic blood, you being Irish and me being a Celtic Scot. I don't know. I think part of that is because we're so emotional. You know what I mean? It's just something to do with maybe born on an island. I don't know. But as I said to you from the very start, without my wife Barbara supporting me, I would have done nothing. That's for sure. She was the wind beneath my wings, and I'm truly grateful. And she's not standing behind me with a gun, I can assure you.
Yeah, you're not having Mr. Well, we'll drink to your wife. So, slán Jabá.
Slán Jabá.
Wish you good health and every success, and thank you so much, as I said.
Come and see me.
We will be there as the first opportunity. This bloody COVID, and we'll make a trip over.
You'll be made most welcome, and I'll take you around the distilleries and you can see them yourself and make a nice.
If you reciprocate the favour by coming over here at some point, that would be fantastic.
I'd love to do that. That's a deal, okay?
That's a
That's
deal.
a deal. Okay, Sergio, thank you. It's been my pleasure.
It's been an honor. Thank you very much. Slán Siobhan. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Wow. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It is an honor and a dream come true to speak to people of that caliber. Even if they're Scottish, whiskey just brings different people together. So thank you very much for joining us. If you have enjoyed it, please do leave a comment in the comment section and do subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions going forward or any suggestions for how we can improve the show, please do let us know. And Slán Siobhan to all of you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. God bless. Bye-bye.